The worst 12 hours of my life. I would like to start off by providing the following trigger warning. There will be mention of sexual assault. This story contains sexual assault, mention of rape, and drug use. I'm a woman. I'm from the UK, and I'm writing these lines in the year 2022, during the month of September. I've been meaning to post this in here for a while. Wrote my first draft back in April, so it's taken a long time and a lot of therapy for me to be able to think about this experience. I've noticed how many people's stories take place over weeks, months, even years, so I'm here to tell you mine. 12 hours of my life. I managed to block out a lot of memories surrounding this night, but earlier this year I was mocked and my PTSD returned, as did a lot of the missing memories of those 12 hours. This is the first time I'm telling anyone the full story of what happened to me. I haven't told my partner, my therapist, my parents. No one knows the details. If there is anything that should be taken away from my story, it's this. Remember that you don't need to be polite to everyone you meet. The setting. In October 2018, I was age 18, in my first year at university in a big city in the UK. I had always lived in the countryside before this, so was never very street smart. About a year before I went to uni, I had started a relationship with this guy, Jimmy, now my ex. It was my first real relationship, and I thought the world of him, but it was not reciprocated in a loving and compassionate way. Jimmy started off as a very emotionally abusive and got progressively worse, but that's a whole other story. At this point, Jimmy and I had been together just under a year and had applied to universities in the same city, mostly by coincidence, and both moved to the same city. I wanted to have a proper student life, so got accommodation in a student block on the other side of the city to him. Jimmy had been using drugs for quite a while, initially starting off just smoking weed, but this progressed rapidly, and by the time we were at uni, he was regularly doing a lot of hard drugs, plus smoking weed multiple times a day. Honestly, I don't think he was ever not high. When we moved to university, we still saw each other every couple of days. And he found a regular drug dealer, Mark, that he had been using continually since we got there in September. Jimmy used to buy from Mark multiple times a week, so in a handful of occasions I had briefly met him. Mark lived a lot closer to my student accommodation than to Jimmy's, so a couple of weeks before this happened, Jimmy had started picking up drugs from Mark when he came to see me, meaning Mark would often be outside of my accommodation. Jimmy had asked me a few times if I would pick up the drugs he bought from Mark, but I had always felt weird speaking to Mark on my own. Plus, I rarely smoke weed, so felt very weird picking up drugs in general. 6 p.m. One day at the end of October, Jimmy had plans to come and see me that evening and asked me again if I would pick up some weed from Mark. I was in a good mood that day and feeling more confident than usual, so for the first time I agreed to. Jimmy gave me Mark's number and said that Mark would message me when he was on his way. Only around 10 minutes later, I got a message from Mark saying that he was nearly outside my apartment and I needed to go outside, so I did. Outside of my accommodation there was a quieter area with a lot of benches, so I sat and waited for him. Behind me was only a wall and a small contained area that had all the bins for the building. Out of nowhere, I felt someone's hands on my shoulder in a really weird, creepy way. I jumped, obviously, and I realized it was Mark, who I barely recognized as I had only briefly seen him a couple of times. I realized now that my back had been to the wall and the bin storage, so he must have been waiting there. I was immediately on guard because of how he touched my shoulders, especially because I didn't know him, so shifted away from him as he sat down next to me. He began talking to me as if we were buddies, asking me 1,000,001 questions about myself, like deeply personal questions. The whole time I was deflecting, not wanting to give any information, so I started asking him questions instead. He began a really deep monologue about himself and his life, where he openly told me that he had just gotten out of prison a few months before. It was for armed something, some kind of violent crime. I engaged his ramblings, just nodding along, but still trying to get back to the whole point of just picking up drugs for my boyfriend. 7 p.m. I have always been able to talk to anyone, and was always taught to be nice when someone is talking, so I ended up sitting there for around an hour trying to get the conversation back to the reason I was there: pick up drugs for my boyfriend and go. It was so long, it actually started getting dark. This guy just kept talking. I knew my boyfriend was going to be coming over soon, so I kept looking at my phone to see if he was on his way, but he hadn't replied. Eventually, I told Mark that I needed to get back inside as I was meeting up with my boyfriend soon, and then going clubbing after with some friends, so I needed to get ready. And could I please just pick up the drugs? He then said, "Oh, well, I can't give them to you here. There is CCTV everywhere. We can't go inside so that I can give them to you." I had witnessed him giving my boyfriend drugs in this same spot countless times before, so I knew this was bullshit. Mark to come back to my apartment, so told him that he could go into the lobby of my building where there was a disabled bathroom, and he could give them to me there. He agreed and followed me inside. We went into the bathroom. It was a very large room, so I didn't have to be too close to him, and he locked the door behind us. He then began fiddling with something in his pocket. I assumed the drugs, but instead pulled down his trousers fully and started peeing in the toilet. I was hugely freaked out. This guy just presented his dick to me and began peeing, but I rationalized that there was no way he had any sexual motive because he had met me and my boyfriend together, so knew I was in a relationship. I figured he just really needed to pee. I had kept my eyes shut the whole time, and when he flushed, I thought that finally he would give me the drugs that I was there to collect. This whole thing had been going on for about an hour and a half by this point. He said, "Can I come and roll it in your desk? And then I'll give you Jimmy's stuff." I asked again if he could just give it to me now, and he said no, saying that I was being rude for not inviting him in. By this point I was wanting to get ready to go out with my friends later that evening, and knew my boyfriend would be coming by any minute, so figured it'd be okay even though I didn't want this. It's worth noting that I was emotionally abused by my boyfriend and knew he would be mad at me if I didn't collect his drugs, or if I annoyed Mark because he was his favorite dealer. I honestly figured that Mark was harmless, despite him telling me he was a violent criminal. Fuck my life. And just assured myself that he was only a bit of creepy. It would be fine. 8 p.m. Reluctantly, I took Mark up to my apartment, opened the door and let him in. I said he had to roll his joint fast because I had to get ready. Finally, he gave me the drugs that my boyfriend wanted, so I felt better at this point. He walked over to my desk, moved all my things to the side and sat down, getting out the things to roll his joint. I cannot roll a joint, but I've seen Jimmy do it countless times, so I knew it doesn't take more than a minute or so. Mark keeps trying to talk to me, but at this point my answers are getting shorter and shorter. He rolls his joint so slowly I cannot even describe it. He rolls this joint so slowly I cannot even describe it. He then said, "Well, I can't smoke this outside. So is it cool if I just stay here and smoke it? It'll only take 5 minutes to smoke." I said no and told him again that I had to get ready. He replied, "It's okay, you can get ready with me here." By this point, I was over it. I messaged my boyfriend again to tell him to hurry up. Mark asked me again, and in my frustration wanting this guy out of my apartment, I said, "Okay, sure, just be quick." I then went out of my room into the shared kitchen. I only had 2 flatmates, and no one else was in the apartment that night. I grabbed some wine and a glass, so that I could have some solitary pre-drinks, and I returned to my room. I sat for another 15 minutes, being increasingly less polite, but he kept talking to me. I drank my first glass of wine pretty fast, and just decided if Mark was going to take ages, then I would just get ready to go out with my friends. I told him that as soon as he finished smoking, he could just leave on his own, so I left him sat at my desk. I took some clothes into the bathroom and jumped into the shower. "9 p.m. Maybe a minute or so into my shower, I heard some soft footsteps outside the door, and like a scene from a freaking horror movie, I saw the door handle slowly be pushed down. Thank fuck I remembered to lock the door. All of a sudden, Mark began banging on the door. I turned the shower off and I just said, "Hi?" through the door. He shouted through the door asking me to let him in because he needed to pee again. I obviously said no, and I just got dried and dressed. Thankfully, I took clothes to the bathroom as fast as I could. I obviously said no, and I just got dried and dressed as fast as I could. Thankfully, I took clothes to the bathroom. By this point, I figured there was no way he was going to leave my apartment until I did, so I did my makeup as fast as I physically could, and I messaged my friends that I'd be coming to theirs sooner than I had planned. I still hadn't gotten a reply from my boyfriend, so I just told him that I was going out early and not to come over. I got ready to go, and I told Mark that I was leaving now and he needed to come downstairs with me. He was still sat at my desk and ignored what I was saying. He asked if he could stay in my room while I was out because he was tired and wanted a nap. Finally, I was firm with him, and after a lot of convincing, he left with me. I made sure to order an Uber to my friend's place so that he couldn't try and walk with me. And by the time we got outside, my Uber was nearly there. He stood with me, looking over my shoulder at my phone the whole time. Then the Uber arrived. I got into it, and Mark straight up walked around the other side and got in. I was in disbelief and laughed, and then told the Uber driver that I didn't know who this guy was and that he wasn't getting in with me. The Uber driver was not as polite as me and told Mark to get out. And he did. "10 p.m. I sat there on the way to my friend's house, and I finally felt calm that I had gotten away from Mark. I called my friend from the Uber and told her what happened, so she said that she would come outside of her building to get with me with a group of her flatmates. My friend's accommodation was not far from mine, and took longer to get to by car than on foot because of the one-way system in the city. But I didn't care at this point. Maybe 10 to 15 minutes later I arrived, and my friend came over to my Uber, then brought me back to her group of friends. She had quite a few people with her, and I suddenly noticed that one of her male flatmates was talking to someone slightly away from the group. I looked over and I suddenly realized that he was talking to Mark. I guess he was looking at the address when I had the Uber app open earlier. I whispered to my friend, and she freaked out and went inside with me straight away. I was super freaked out that this guy wouldn't just leave me alone. He refused to leave my side for the last few hours, and now he had followed me to my friend's house. Honestly, I felt much safer now, and met a few creeps in my time. So I decided to get over it by having a nice time with my friend. So we sat in her kitchen, having a chat and some drinks. "11 p.m. After a while talking to her, I almost forgot what had happened just an hour ago, and I was getting increasingly tipsy from the wine. The kitchen door opened and her male flatmate comes inside, announcing that he invited a guy in who had given him free weed. You guessed it! Mark walked in. Mark addressed me by name and walked over, putting his hands around my waist from behind. I get pretty confident when I drink, so I had no problem pushing him off me and announcing to everyone in a jokey way, "Yeah, this is the guy who has been following me around all evening. I don't know him." Even in this room with all of my friends, flatmates, I still didn't feel safe. He stayed away from me, looking at me for a while from the other side of the kitchen, and I just ignored him. My friend could tell I was uncomfortable, so suggested we go and drink in her room. Around 30 minutes after going into her room, the door slams open suddenly, and Mark is standing there. He says, "Oh, I was looking for the bathroom. Can I use yours?" My friend had an suit. She tells him to get the fuck out, and he does. She tells him to get the fuck out, and he does. I'm honestly just bored of this guy's constant presence at this point, so we decide to just go to the club early. 12 p.m. We grab our stuff, run past the kitchen door and outside. My friend orders us an Uber, and we get in and go to the club. After a while, some of her flatmates join us, but Mark does not, thank fuck. The people who had been in the kitchen said that Mark left shortly after he saw me and my friend leave. But there was no sign of him now. I just try and enjoy the night, but being a poor student, I can't afford any more drinks at the club. As I begin to sober up, I realize how shaken up and creeped out the whole evening made me, and I don't feel safe. A.m. After only a couple of hours, I decide that I just want to go home and sleep because this whole experience freaked me the fuck out. I take an Uber back. I use my key card to get into my apartment building. I go upstairs and into my apartment. I start getting ready for bed, put on some PJs, and I started taking off my makeup. All of a sudden, I heard a loud knock on my door. I had no clue who it was, but since it was still early-ish for a Friday night, I thought my boyfriend maybe finally decided to show up. My door didn't have a peephole, so I walked to the door in my PJs, unlocked it, planning to open it a tiny bit to see who was, and then BAM! The door flew open so fast that I was pushed backwards into my apartment and then shoved into my room, which was directly across the front door. In my panic, I froze. Then looked up only to realize that Mark was now standing in my apartment. The realization started to sink in. Mark has just forced his way into my room, and I was trapped here with him. He was visibly angry and very high. He locked the door behind him and began rambling about how I was so rude for not inviting him in with friends, for ignoring him, for not letting him in the Uber, etc. I was terrified, so ran over to my bed and I grabbed my phone. He walked over behind me and began grabbing me, touching me as much as he could. So I shouted at him to get off. He saw my phone in my hand and immediately smiled and told me to open the camera. I was terrified, so did as he said, and he said he wanted a picture of us together. I did as I was told, and took a selfie with him while he posed with his arms around me and then kissing my cheek and my neck. He then screamed at me to unlock my phone, so I did. He made me open up all my messages and sent Jimmy the selfie of me and Mark sat next to each other on my bed, so I did. He waited for it to send and then grabbed my phone and put it down on the desk. He sat at my desk for the next 4 to 5 hours, talking at me continually, saying how I was so rude. I needed someone to teach me some manners now. How I had to do what he said because he was older than me. How Jimmy wasn't good enough for me. How I was so beautiful and how he knew that I needed to be with him. He told me that his girlfriend knew he had been at my house that evening and how she said he can't go home and it was all my fault. The whole time I continued bargaining with him, trying to get him to leave, but it didn't work. Occasionally, I would just lie down on my bed or sit and not speak. Each time I did, he would get up and wrap his arms around me or try to spoon me, stroking my face, trying to kiss me, and trying to take my clothes off and touch me every time I fought him off. And he would get angry again and go sit at the desk and keep shouting. I knew that this guy had previously been in prison for some kind of violent crime, so I did not want to piss him off. I just sat there for hours and I quietly sobbed, too scared of trying to leave because I would have to walk past him to get to the door. I was out of options. I didn't know if I could get out without angering him. I couldn't call the police because he had my phone. My flatmates weren't in, so my screams meant nothing. "6 a.m. While he was sat on my desk, he kept smoking more weed or taking a line of whatever drug. So was becoming more and more out of it. He was becoming more sleepy as he smoked more weed, until I was able to speak between his ramblings. So I gently said I was going to the bathroom. I noticed he had his eyes partially closed and figured I only had one chance. So I took the opportunity and I grabbed my phone off the desk as fast as I could, unlocked the door, and I ran out of the apartment. The one thing I will always remember is being in tears, pressing the button for the elevator to come probably about 50 times because I was so scared that he was going to come after me. As I got into the elevator, I heard him come out of my apartment, shouting my name, but the elevator doors closed as he looked at me. I was able to get downstairs and out of the building. I ran around the corner of the building in my PJs and I maniacally dialed the number for the police. I told them what happened and that this guy had been in prison until recently. And next thing I know, around 5 police cars showed up. I was in such a state and called my boyfriend to tell him what happened. He was still awake and hadn't come to visit the night before because he was with a girl who is a friend, and said that now he didn't want to come to be with me because he had some weight on him and didn't want to be near the police. I told him to get to my place right now, and he reluctantly did. The aftermath. The police had to force entry to my apartment because Mark had locked himself in and barricaded the door. They arrested him and he ended up going to prison for drug charges, but not for what he did or tried to do to me. The police said they couldn't prosecute him because I had willingly let him into my apartment earlier that night, and he hadn't physically done anything. Sexual assault and attempted rape, plus holding me hostage in my own apartment, but okay. After I had given my statements to the police, I went back inside to see that after I had escaped, my room was trashed. Mark had thrown things around and smashed things in anger. I'm so glad I got out when I did, because I can't imagine what would have happened if I was trapped in the crossfire. I don't know what happened to Mark after that, but I moved out of that apartment a couple of months later and away from that city as soon as I could when COVID hit, to make sure Mark could never find me. I actually stayed in my abusive relationship for another year or so until I realized that I was too good to put up with Jimmy's shit. I had such severe PTSD from the incident that I couldn't go outside for months after, which messed up the whole of my first year at university. It has taken until now for me to be able to walk around at night, and being alone in public is still really difficult. I'm well aware that the ending is very anticlimactic, and I wish I had been able to advocate for myself, but I just shut down emotionally afterwards. I can't get too much into the details of the sexual assault and attempted rape because honestly, thinking about it makes me want to throw up. But I realized I was so lucky to be able to fight him off every time, because without a doubt he wanted to hurt me. After this happened, I started volunteering with people in prison for crimes like sexual assault to try and prevent him from ever reoffending. I think it's my way of advocating for others because I couldn't advocate for myself. If you take one thing away from this, stop being so polite. I was raised to be nice to everyone, and I realize now that being polite worsened everything. I wish I had never been polite enough to pick up drugs for my ex, or polite enough to let Mark into my apartment when he begged. So to Mark, fuck you, and please, let's not meet again.
Jimmy is such a piece of shit. I can't imagine sending my girl to pick up drugs for me. POS, both of them. Glad you survived. Jesus, I just hate these people. I gotta say the cops are pieces of shit too for not taking the sexual assault and attempted rape more seriously. No charges at all. Are you serious? Not sure how strict drug sentencing is in the UK, but I'd wager that he is probably only going to get a couple years in prison and be out doing the same stuff again. And about the false imprisonment, wow, just surrounded by garbage human beings. I am so sorry this happened to you. OP, you are so resilient, and I am glad you broke things off with Jimmy. I hope you are getting mental health help and have a good support system.
Leaving places and relationships like this is easier said than done. I appreciate your words. And yeah, at some point, I was criticized for not leaving a bad place earlier. Being in that place clouds your judgment. Plus, living in fear for your life thanks to an evil and abusive partner, woman or man, is absolutely crippling and debilitating.
While you might think you were too polite, I can say that you were much tougher than I would have managed to be. Good job on not letting him do what he wanted to do, and for making sure not to escalate the situation. Gibby and Mark are disgusting pieces of the shit, and I hope your life looks a lot better now. Terrifying great.
I am now in a very happy and healthy relationship with my non-binary partner, and we have our own apartment together and adopted an adorable kitty. My partner has also promised that if they ever see Jimmy in real life, he will be receiving a swift punch to the face.
Everyone hates Mark, for sure, but me and all of my homies hate Jimmy too. I'm torn between Mark knowing Jimmy was cheating on Up that night, trying to take advantage of that fact. He knew she would be alone, and Jimmy trying to give Mark a night with his girlfriend in exchanging for drugs. The latter, the latter seems dramatic, but why the fuck would he ask Up to do the pick up for him if he knew he was going to peel on her for the other women? This is just terrible to read. Christ, this reminds me so much of what happened when I was a freshman in college. I didn't fight him, though. I just let it happen. I am glad you were able to keep him off you. I'm glad you managed to come out of it as an unscathed survivor.
Honestly, I only was able to fight him off because he was ridiculously high and not as able to fight me. Under any other circumstances, I would have done exactly the same as you. And yeah, I know how terrifying it is, and I'm so sorry you have a similar story. I hope you're healing.
One common thing that I noticed with a lot of women, myself included, is that we try to be polite and not so direct in what we want when we feel uncomfortable unless something. Is it because we don't want to make the situation worse in case the person reacts violently or badly? Is it because we don't think it will actually get worse? Is it because we are all taught to be polite and not passive? If the podcast Crime Junkie taught me anything, be weird, be rude, stay alive. That being said, my natural inclination is to still not ruffle any feathers, even if I'm completely in the right and feel uncomfortable. But hopefully, I can be rude to someone who is harassing me. Glad you're okay, OP. I'm glad you made it out, even though I know it was still traumatic for you. You're a survivor. To be able to do what you had to do to get out alive and to fight him off and to work up the courage to grab your phone and run to safety. I'm sorry for all you went through, but look at it as a life lesson. You learned a lot about yourself. You are tough, brave, and a quick thinker in dangerous situations, and I'm sure you've changed in a way that will help keep you safe in the future. It is a shame that we have to be distrustful of everyone, but we really have to as women. It's in our nature to want to be nice and accommodating. None of this was your fault in any way, and I hope you know that. So thankful you made it out of that situation, and I hope you can overcome the trauma. Sounds like you're on the right path.
Oh my god, that was terrifying. I've never been happier for an anticlimactic ending. Thank fuck you had the foresight to lock the bathroom door when you were in the shower. That gave me anxiety to read. I can't imagine what it was like for you having to live it. I love that you volunteer. You definitely didn't have to, and you don't owe that to anyone, but it's very selfless to try and put good back out into the world after such an awful experience.
Supporting people who have committed those crimes honestly helped me heal the most. I realized that life circumstances, their own trauma, and past experiences that often cause that behavior. I realize it's the life circumstances, their own trauma, and past experiences that often cause that behavior. I found some reassurance in knowing that it wasn't about me. There was nothing wrong with me in particular. It could have been anyone. I know that sounds even more terrifying, but it really helped me realize it was not my fault.
Now that's something totally new. I'm curious. If you're comfortable, you can explain what kinds of things you do talk to them about to help prevent them reoffending. Do you think it works?
I write to people and visit those who don't have many others to talk to. So help support whatever prison programs they are involved in, and helping them to unpack their trauma and the things that led them to their actions. It's about making people understand why they did what they did so it can be prevented from happening again. Often, when people commit crimes, it's not because they are a deranged psychopath. It's because their life circumstances and a series of bad choices have led them there. Basically making sure they understand why they did what they did, take responsibility, relearn behaviors, and rebuild their lives. 3 of the people I have worked with have been released and have massively improved their lives. I think being able to speak to someone who is a victim of the crime they committed really causes them to see the impact of their actions. I can't disclose many details, but one has decided to go to university, one retrained to a career they were passionate about, and one started their own business. I'm smiling when I say this.
This is so fucked up and beyond scary. I'm so sorry this happened to you. I'm so much a people pleaser and polite also. Your story will forever stick with me. I'm so glad you're okay and happy to know you have slowly worked through this. It couldn't have been easy, and to also share your story took such bravery. You're one strong woman. Don't ever forget that. You survived.
And I like to finish this by saying thanks for listening. To the one person who called me a badass, thank you. I can't tell you how much I love being called a badass.